Welcome to Event Yak. In this show, I yak it up with Austin Beaver. Now, he's launching a new events company called EXP. You might know him through his former production company, Benchmark. They're headquartered in Seattle, so this is my first West Coast interview for the show. Today, we talk about the challenges of launching a new endeavor during a pandemic. You know, launching a podcast, launching a company, rebranding during a tidal wave. You kind of get the picture. We also discuss how he thinks the event industry is going to roll out of this thing. We talk about walking the tightrope between doing company-sponsored events and personal events for his clients. And we talk a little bit about his current favorite app and dip our toes into a conversation about East Coast versus West Coast approaches to production. And that, my friends, is a topic definitely to be continued. So stand by.
Playback ending in 5.
Standby fake music, standby talent.
3, 2, 1. Clear.
Music go. Talent go.
Welcome to Event Yak, where event pros share their stories about the past, present, and future. I'm your host, Terri Walters. Welcome to Austin Beaver from Seattle, Washington.
Hi, Terry. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Austin?
Good. We're still under house arrest, but we're doing okay out here.
Yeah, it's like I'm saying, this is my first West Coast interview. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. How many times do you hear this question? How's the weather out there in amazing Seattle?
All the time. And we always lie to you people, and we just tell you that it's just raining. It just keeps on raining. We can't stop it.
Yeah, you just want to keep us out. I know it's beautiful out there. It's like, It's raining. I've been out there a couple of times, and I think that Mount Rainier is actually a myth. I don't think it actually exists.
So you've got to come out between like June and September, pretty much. Any other time, you're not gonna get the best of it.
All right. Well, I think, I did see it once, so I know it's really not a myth, but, and it's beautiful. And it's the beautiful land of Starbucks and Amazon and so many others, including EXP, which is, I guess it's your new company. This is something that you're launching now in the midst of a pandemic and a financial thing that's going on. You sound like me.
I had all this time on my hands. I figured, hey, let's pivot to the position that's probably going to be one of the most affected and hardest to come back by, which will be corporate, and go from there. So EXP was Benchmark Productions. There's a handful of them around the U.S. Believe it or not, with as much sort of kind of, I'm going to say, private clients that we had dealt with, originally having us be lost in the shuffle of that brand name wasn't a bad thing. Mm-hmm. And then, things evolved for us, and we grew a lot. And corporate really ends up being a place that we've been cemented in for a while. And so this is the crazy thing about the current situation with the COVID virus. I think that most people in our industry agree that the private market will probably be the quickest to come back, and that corporate might take a little while longer. And then concert and festivals, Lord only knows where those things are going to land, right? But So the part that I think will come back the quickest, which is more along the private side, is the part that we have been stepping away from slowly over the last year and a half or two. So yeah, it just hit me at just the right time, but it's okay. I think it'll be a good thing in the long run. So
timing is everything, they say. So was Benchmark like a franchise that you were involved with, or was that like your company that you started, or?
Yeah, so Benchmark was a partnership of mine a long time ago, between a great event planner in the area had come to me and pitched the idea of teaming up with both the planning and then the production side of it, which, as you know very well, getting those two parts to line up
Yes.
in any kind of an event is one of the biggest struggles.
Right.
So we went that route that I know, a handful of companies across the US have done really, really successfully. And it worked out great for us. Then we just hit a spot where the production side has just been growing and growing. And it was something that I want to push the envelope on and see how far we can go with it. And so from that end, we still work together all the time. But she just took back over the planning portion of it. And then I kind of took Benchmark, and then I'm relaunching it as EXP for the corporate market. And yeah, doing what we do that way. So
cool. What types of things do you do? You say you work with the corporate market. What kind of services do you provide? Do you have gear? Do you have guys and gals that work with you, or how do you do that? What's your model?
So we have we've got about 10,000 square feet of warehouse space that has audio, video, lighting, and a shop in it. We keep only a certain amount of equipment. It's got to turn. So from the business owner perspective, I've got to turn stuff a certain amount of time over the course of a year for it to make sense to take up square footage, right? So the pieces that we have tend to be a little bit more specialty. And then whenever we get into, some of the larger audio rigs and certain types of lighting, honestly, for the majority of the events that we do, it's a mix of us going to rental for or contractors for the main core pieces, and then supplementing with what we have within our warehouse space. And what's worked out really, really well for me is having the ability to go to rental and contractors and use, be really specific about the tools that I use that we just, we can't afford to keep a D&B rig and L acoustic, as well as, QSC line array, depending on what we need and what environment, right? So it's easier for me to contract that stuff out, and for us to supplement with maybe some of the auxiliary stuff that would be in smaller rooms or smaller spaces around.
Right.
And and then from there, management team's all internal for us. And then most of the labor side is contractors. But we keep prior to COVID, had about 8 people that were sort of full-time in the office. And then, we flexed to whatever we needed for contractors. And then and that's sort of the same model that we keep to whenever when we're on the road with events. We'll come in with a management team, and then we'll work with local for all the key pieces. So
based on what you've seen in the past, you kind of garner and keep whatever gear you think you use most of the time. Like I would guess things like, maybe graphics computers and certain projectors and things like that. Do you do stuff with hotels, or do you are you mostly you deal on the client side?
Yeah. So this is to great lead into the rest of the other part of your question. I would say our makeup is predominantly corporate, then a fair amount of what I'll call like kind of high-end private, which currently it's been a lot of political fundraisers at people's homes. There's we call them estate events, where there are folks that have properties that are honestly just custom built to hold 30 to 80 people, and we act as the provider in their space to handle all of the audio, video, lighting pieces, and then the nonprofit side.
And so when you talk about the public and then the like a public event, kind of private event versus a corporate event, now are you kind of doing these events for kind of the same people, and how do you kind of walk that line?
Yeah, so it's one of the neatest things for us is our client base happens to be clients that serve both the corporate side as well as the private. So we will have for some of the CEOs and executives, we'll do private events for them, and then we're also involved with their companies as well for the sales kickoff that's a week long at a ballroom or hotel. Sometimes we'll also do marketing or events for them that are geared towards their customers as well. And then we're doing birthday parties for the CEO or the executive, or if he's hosting people at his home, or if just a party for a party's sake. We do a fair amount of those too.
Mm-hmm.
And, the scope of the types of venues that we work in move everywhere from large ballrooms to, airplane hangars to, tent build outs in the middle of nowhere to, private homes. So we're all over the place, and we've got to be pretty adaptable.
Yeah, I mean, they seem like two totally different kinds of events with two different types of stakeholders. You've got like the corporate officers, and then you've kind of got this private corporate officer and maybe his spouse or partner. Like, what do you find that one's more difficult than the other, or?
Well, working both sides, where you've worked for the the CEO for his wife's birthday party on Saturday night, and then you have to come back in, Monday or Tuesday morning and sit down in a boardroom with the executives and other stakeholders that are involved in, a multi-million-dollar 5-day long, sales kickoff for all of their employees that are flying into town. It's night and day, and it's really, I talk to the folks that work with me all the time about knowing how to transition between being very close to someone and being friendly, and then several days later being in a spot where you are very much an employee or a vendor partner, and there's different different behavioral pieces, and you come off of your Saturday night and it was debaucherous and wild and fun and crazy, and people may have consumed just a little too much and gotten way out of hand, and then Monday morning rather, you're walking into the office with all of them, and the handful of people that were at that event Saturday, they have to make the transition with you now too, where
everybody's
they're really
up.
hoping you're not going to joke around too much about whatever it was you saw. And mom's the word. So so you kind of step into a role then where on Saturday night, when you were doing private events, you were a collaborator with the key decision maker, and there was only one person, and it was fun, and everybody had a great time. And then on Monday, you have many masters to serve within one room, and you're doing everything you can to make sure that that the marketing people have their needs met, as well as the operations people and the person that runs a sales division, and everyone needs their piece of that particular event handled accordingly, and they all want to make sure that they are as important to you as the CEO is, because they know that you have a relationship there.
Right. It seems to be a model that you are successful with. I mean, how do you remember the first time that this happened, and did you think about it and go, how do I manage this?
Yeah, I don't know about the first time, but so as we're talking, there's one there's one moment in particular where we had a joint 50th birthday party with the CEO and his wife, and all right, so it wasn't as debaucherous as this sounds, but 50 Shades of Grey had just come out.
Okay.
It rhymed with the CEO's name, so
okay.
we used that as our kind of our kickoff in the creative. We rented out a nightclub, and we brought in just a whole host of odd characters to sort of fill in these vignettes throughout the space, and both a band and a DJ, and it was just a great night. It was a whole lot of fun. It walked the line, but it was, believe it or not, you were pushing the imagination, but
right.
not actually what was seen or done.
Right, exactly.
Right. So now imagine coming out. Right. Imagine coming out of that, and there we had a couple of his executives were in the crowd, and it was just rowdy and fun, and everybody had a great time. So 3 days later, I walk into a boardroom and sit down and in file 8 or 12 people. Of them, 3 of the folks were at that event, and now you have to make the pivot. And now that move from being the person that could help them have that kind of fun needs to shift into all of the key pieces that every company is trying to accomplish whenever they have a gathering. What the message is, how long you can make that message stick, and how we're gonna deliver it. And it's it is the funniest thing to sit there and, if anybody asks whether or not you have great ideas, that there's a handful of folks in the room going, God, please be careful what you say right now.
Yeah.
We just saw what happened on Saturday.
We know he has great ideas.
Yeah, we do. We just don't want him to really bring them
right.
up right now.
Don't go there. Oh, that's so funny. Well,
Yeah.
it seems fun, and it seems, you kind of have an entertainment background, and I think that kind of helps with what you're doing here. Now, you started out I looked down your LinkedIn profile, mm-hmm. and we had a chat beforehand, but you were a DJ, and I don't know, like DJs, I've met a lot of DJs lately. I don't know what it is. I just keep running into them, which is kind of cool. I kind of dig DJs.
Look, it's a really creative space.
It is.
Funny enough, in the especially the technical side for audio and lighting, I bump into a lot of guys that do it as a hobby or had some sort of a past. It tends to bring a lot of creatives out.
Yeah. I mean, it's you're kind of a, for lack of a better descriptor, a one-man show. You come in with your lights and your music, and you have to have the big personality to be good at it. So do you think that has helped you with the transition? I mean, and even, when you say that you're an event producer within that kind of DJ scope, which I look at that. I never thought of it that way, but it is. You're really the person who's driving that party. How did that help you when you transitioned into the corporate / bigger entertainment stuff?
In the entertainment world, as you kind of climb the ladder and you progress and you move up to bigger and bigger stages, you become more ingrained in what the show looks like that you're putting on for the audience, not just the music that you're playing. So if you even take a band, we worked with ZZ Top not too long ago, and those guys have a very, very distinct way that they do their show. And as in the DJ realm, as you get into those stages that are more well produced and bigger and better, and you start realizing that you have access to those technical people that can help you create these moments and this show for those folks, then you get deeper and deeper into production. And in the end, I think that for me in my career there, the production element was something that really separated me out from the rest of the pack. And it was, at the time, I didn't realize it at all, but it moved me down this path that was truly just life-changing. I mean, I started really getting into production probably about 10 years ago. And some of the best people in the world that I have ever had the chance to meet have come from this industry. And it's so much, I don't know, it's so fun, and it's so much deeper, and there's so much more to it than just two speakers on a stick, or in a couple turntables and a microphone. For me, it progressed way past that, and that's what sort of led me into the path that I'm on now.
Did you find that you had, like, you were getting more and more equipment, and then as it started to evolve, you started to do different things? I mean, is that what it was? Like, all of a sudden now I've got all this equipment now.
No. So funny enough, it wasn't. I built the team rather than the gear. And I think that's something that's guided me really well in this life, is that it's not so much the gear, it's the team. Everybody in audio knows that a great A1 can take a mediocre rig and make it sound really good. They can work it, right?
Yep, you're absolutely right.
It's way easier to take a great rig and make that work smooth. But the truth is, if your A1 sucks, you're not getting very far, even with the dollar spent on the high end gear. So I look at all of those people as talent as well. Even the riggers and the roadies. The truth is, you've got, with as much that we do that is out of the box, where all of a sudden you realize that, the point that's on the diagram that you really thought was supposed to be there, but there's 50 points on the diagram you got, isn't in that one spot in the ceiling, and somebody messed up on it and nobody ever bothered changing the paperwork or whatever it is. You've got to punt. Everybody has to be flexible and able to move. And in events where you're not working with a built-in equipment, which we rarely do, those guys have to be creative. I actually think that the further down the food chain you go, the more important the players are. And it just even as simple as guys not getting stuff off of trucks in time or not getting things, set in time. Just it could throw the entire event off.
It totally does it, because everything cascades. We've done events where we've got a tight load in, you agree to a tight load in, it's great, everything's focused, you've got all your ducks in a row, and you get there and the freight elevator breaks.
Yeah, or the client walks in the room and says, "Oh, by the way, they want to do their rehearsals an hour early." And
right.
you realize that maybe this is just not that kind of client that you can say no to.
Right.
And, you bend over backwards to make it happen.
It's true. You get rehearsals, Austin?
Mm-hmm.
Jeez.
Yeah. On good days.
No, yeah, exactly.
But really, in that moment, the ability to spin around and holler at your team and tell them, "Hey, we now just lost an hour," and to watch them move it's the coolest thing for me to sit back in a room or a space and watch it all come together. Even to this day, it's just still fascinating.
Yeah. I think also that people are the biggest asset, actually, to anybody.
Yes.
Like you say. You've got you and I both. We have a lot of highly technical gear that changes all the time, and you've got to have the right people who can come in and just make it work. And I'm sure you have a core team that you bring in, or a couple of core teams that you use. I think that's a great model. It's kind of like a boutique-y thing. You're a little more than a boutique, but you're right. Still, smaller.
It's scalable. Yeah, you're not wrong. So right. One of the things that I'm experiencing right now, or had before COVID, and I feel really confident that we'll pick up coming off of this, is the ability to scale up. So, when you've got multiple events that are each as important as the other to the client and both to you and maybe to your bottom line as well, how in the world do you try not to have a B team? And if you do have a B team, how do you become comfortable with that? And how do you set those guys up for success? Yeah. The scaling portion of it is something that, personally I'm working through right now in my career. But again, it's just, it is so much about the people, and the gear becomes, although the gear is important, it minimizes when the importance of the gear minimizes when you have, outstanding folks working for you.
Yeah, and troubleshooters and people who are invested. I find that too. That's the other thing. A lot of times a client will want to go into a facility and there's a chosen or preferred vendor. And we've worked with that. We've worked with that in the past as producers. I prefer not that, most of the time that there's issues, but you just don't want to reinvent the wheel all the time. It just does not save you a lot of time.
Yeah, but at the same time, so for a couple of our corporate clients, everything that we do with them is on the road. We're just based out of Seattle, and where we land for their events is where we land. In those cases, when we're working, funny enough, especially like in New York area, where every venue has a locked in or preferred group, it feels like that you have to work with. We just kind of go one-to-one with them in certain spots, like their A1 and my A1 will work together. And that, again, going back to the people, you've got to have folks that can communicate well, get across the needs for your team and your client, and do it in a way that motivates and keeps everybody moving. And you just, you can still be really effective with houses that have mandatory teams you have to work with. But I don't think that means giving up your position that you're holding for your client when going in. So I prefer to still bring out our crew, still have them work, side by side with people.
How do you, and it's just kind of a touchy question, how do you tell your client that now you've kind of got your crew and they're paying for a parallel crew in essence on certain things? Is that something that they have come to accept, that they know? How do you navigate that? What would you tell a client about that?
Usually that we reach a certain point, probably within probably within 3 events. And the hope is that you're doing those 3 events within, 12, 24 months. So it's within a short period of time, not just a single annual thing, where they have come to know my crew as well, at least on some level. And they like and trust your LD. They like and trust your production manager. They like and trust your stage manager. And my end goal is to very quickly get out of being a vendor and be a partner. So to be a partner, you have to be able to bring things to the table. You have to be able to troubleshoot. You have to have your team come in and act as if which we are all employed by that company. Mm-hmm. So when you've moved into a partner role, those questions don't really come up that much. If there's some auditing that's going on, I think it's a really simple explanation. And in the end, you're doing everything you can to protect the client. And if you think of the cost to have stage manager, PM, A1, and an LD come out on site, it's not that exactly. It's not that much to the bottom line of the whole show to be able to ensure that we're getting what we need. There's one of the downsides about working in venues like that is that every now and then you have a weak person in a lead role, and it can be detrimental to the job.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, the risk, the reward far outweighs the risk when you bring your group in. Do you remember anybody in your past that you would consider like a mentor? I find that we're, as an industry, we have informal mentors, but somebody who really kind of guided you, gave you advice.
Yeah. So in the DJ world so I started DJing when I was 16 years old. And the guy that kind of set my path and my compass as a single operator with the smallest show you could think of in your life has had this impact that it's just like this little ripple effect in my entire career. Most of it has to do with making sure that you're taking the ethical path when times get tough and there's decisions on the line of, should we talk about this? Should we ever bring it up? Do I make this, this call? This call's only good for me. Is it going to be okay for everybody? Just more ethical stuff. When it comes to technical, yeah, I've had a handful of folks, and funny enough, I wouldn't say there was ever any one person, but what I have found is the guys that have taken the time to learn their disciplines really, really well, the technical people, have been some of the folks that I've learned the most from. And that's all right. So that's the show side. And then there's the business side. Yeah. And in the business portion, yeah, I've had two different people that one is in the industry and one is not in the industry. And I think that is just that's a whole different set of skills that somebody needs to have to be able to survive, especially in a tough time like this. How do you scale down? How do you move your money around? How do you manage debt now moving forward? The government right now is giving out all sorts of loans to get people through these tough times, which sounds great. But the truth is they just handed you a credit card and that bill's going to come due. And at what cost are you going to, is it going to be to your future to use those funds now? And it's just a whole different thing, the business versus the show. My favorite quote is don't forget, it's show business.
Show business. There right. You go. Exactly. Do you think though that we as an industry do enough mentoring? Do you think we have opportunities for young people to grow? There's evolving technology, there's evolving jobs. Do you think that
at the same time, too, there's also evolving clutter in the education out there. I was recently just doing a little bit of research on some things. When right now streaming is sort of a key. Live streaming is a key phrase that everyone's tossing around, because in this moment in time, the ability to hold any type of large, medium, or small size events is not an option anywhere in the United States. But I think one of the things that I'm catching that isn't really being talked about enough is actually recording everything. So it's not live, cleaning it all up in post and then presenting it to the audience as if it were live. So does that make sense? I think that right now, the interesting thing that I'm seeing is a lot of people that are real tech savvy and know their stuff are overthinking what would be a simple solution because they're approaching it as if it were a live event, but the platform now is totally different. It doesn't need to be a live event short of those moments where you need a back and forth with the audience. So when you hit those spots, then making sure everything's live and figuring out the problems and how to solve those, that comes into play. But if it was just a presentation, there's, we are currently rolling out some things for the graduation, so virtual graduations. And we had explored a lot about, the cheapest way for us to do sort of a pop-up studio somewhere and make all this look great. And then in the end, after I did a little bit of research and I spoke to some folks in education, that's not a need for them. Every major newscaster, all the late night talk show hosts, everybody is flipping open a laptop, sitting in their kitchen or their living room and doing a show that generates normally millions and millions of dollars per episode. So the casualness of the presentation is now there. However, us in the live event industry, everything is just always tight and right, and it looks pretty, and it's got different angles, and there how you move through those cuts and changes in the scene. We're trying to figure all of that out now, I think, as an industry. I don't even know what your question was. Did I get close?
Well, I don't know either, but
right,
let's continue on with it. The transitions are always the things that are the most difficult. And I've actually come to, like, in the beginning of all this, I was cringing. These people get on their big shot on CNN or CNBC or whatever, the channel of your choice. And they're up against a white wall. They look like they're, in the jail. All they need is numbers in front of them. It's like worse than looking at a mugshot. And I was cringing, and the sound was not great, and the lighting was not great, and they're rocking in the chair. And I'm thinking, wow, we have gotten dropped into this world that nobody knows anything about. And then they look at it and they don't even think it's bad either. So it's
right.
I don't.
No one's worried about. They're not too worried about what is behind them. I'll get stuck sometimes watching something, and all I can look at is that crappy bookshelf with like a empty baby bottle on it. And you're wondering. Yeah. Okay. So here, I got to tell you, I think that this is great for the live event industry because when we come out of it, the aesthetic right now has been dummied down so far, which is wonderful. That when we come back into it, the ability for us to get the wow factor back, I think it's going to be a lot easier. I really do. I think that stage presentation, your scenics and things like that you're going to do as a pro to make it look good to the audience will be so. You're just going to be on a different level than what the audience has been looking at lately. So we get a little bit of almost like a little bit of a reset. And I don't know about you guys, but trying to struggle to find something new and different and creative within a budget, or whatever the budget may be, even if there's no budget, sometimes has been, that's a task in itself for every company that's out there. And maybe now, moving forward, we get the chance to reuse some of those great ideas that we put out there a while back.
It's true. I think I never thought of it that way, and I think that's a really good insight. We're starting. We've kind of, like you said, not so much the information is kind of dumbed down, but the wow factor is not there, and now we're going to step off. How long do you think it's going to take for people to ramp up after coming out of this thing? I mean, I know nobody really knows when things are, going to start, but.
Yeah. So funny. Shop for us builds some key rental pieces for a national rental company. And we also do scenic stuff for a national retail company too that rolls out these. They're in high end fashion, and they roll out these scenics that they'll move through their shops. And in staying in touch with those folks, I think that there's going to be a big difference between like, let's say, the private event world, which would be weddings, your bar bat mitzvahs, just private parties, even fun, some smaller fundraising stuff. I think those will come back first. And I think that would probably be, so this is tough. What's the date right now? It is the 21st of April in 2020. And as of right now, I would say that most governors across the U.S. have right around the beginning of May, they've asked everybody to stay in lockdown, but they're also discussing that date will get moved further out. My best guess is that around June 1st, because of economics, they start to release some of the hold on how people can gather, and more so the companies that were put into work from home orders. And then I think it's going to be closer to September where we are into sort of full service, full swing again. And I think that around September or so is when you'll start to see more private stuff come back, and the confidence level in private come back first. So the event industry has never dealt with the COVID virus because we got shut down right off the bat. What we have dealt with and what we will deal with moving forward is fear and perception of whether or not it's safe to come out. So in my mind, it's the private event world first. It's corporate stuff second, and the concert and festival world will be really, really interesting because I think that from a financial perspective and just straight up economics, I think that the concert and festival world will be chomping at the bit to go. But the question those guys are going to have to ask themselves is, okay, if we have 30,000 seats that we would normally sell, can we survive off of selling 15,000 of them and still make it worthwhile for everybody that's involved? And they're going to take a hit. There's going to be a loss of revenue in the beginning. And I am one of those people that thinks that it's going to be after we'll see full normalization after there's a vaccine that comes out. But I think that we're going to push the envelope and maybe move a little quicker than the health professionals would advise because of the economic effect. So yeah, there's a long answer to your question.
No, I see that, you're paralleling a lot of what a lot of other people I'm talking to and listening to are saying. That the private stuff, because, and it makes sense. I mean, there's smaller groups, they're private. There's not any kind of, liability issues per se, so that makes sense.
I do think that, so sorry, just because I've been inundated with this, I think that there's certain interesting things that we're going to have to adjust to, especially in the early days of coming off of the stay-at-home orders. One of them is going to be how people are fed. So the buffet lines where you've got 200 people going through, I think that is going to need to be deleted, and there's going to need to be alternate scenarios or a higher dollar spend to have either seated service or stations done a certain way. I think that when people start factoring head counts into some of these things, our crews and our staffs are going to be taken into account on that head count. So for those of us in the industry, we're going to have to really think about reducing headcount size for those that are working the events themselves, because I don't think that it's going to be open free for all right off the bat where you can have thousands of people attend. I think it's going to be in chunks of, all right, we'll allow up to 100 people now, 250 people later, 500 after that. I think it'll be a tiered release of what we can do. And we're going to have to think about, what it looks like to work a job with a skeleton crew or as minimal people as possible. And that may also be something that I think my clients are going to be really interested in knowing that we're taking into account, if we can trim down by 5 people here, that means they can have 5 more guests. So the partnership thing in working with your people, your clients, is going to be a key thing.
How do you think that translates? I think you're completely right. How do you think that translates with big exhibits and things like trade shows and things like that, where, you've got NAB is like one of the biggest, but even any of them, where you've got 5,000 or 10,000 people coming in, how do you think those guys are going to scale it?
Gosh.
I know I never even thought of it myself. What you're saying though makes a lot of sense, but how do they scale something like that?
I think in the United States that the economic piece of it is going to have a stronger movement in us coming out of COVID than the healthcare piece will. And I believe that conferences and conventions are going to be, and trade shows are going to be viewed as being something very important to key businesses that are trying to survive, because they need to get the message back out. They need to get the product back out. They need to share and show.
And the jobs. There's so many jobs attached with what we do.
Yeah. And it starts with, can we sell our product? Because if we can't sell our product, we can't produce it. And if we can't produce it, then nobody's getting paid. At the same time, because those tend to be one of the more, like NAB, CES, larger communal gatherings, it could also be one of the last things that's allowed to come back. Right. But I still think that the as negative as I hear some folks being about how we come out of this, we are gearing up to come back with a vengeance. We're gearing up here at EXP to be in a spot where we can scale dramatically coming off of this, because I think it will shake out a bunch of suppliers and vendors and people within our industry. And there will be a lot of clients that are up for grabs. And I think there's also going to be a fair amount of folks that may have not felt well serviced in the transition to going into a stay-at-home order. Some people that won't forget, and whether it was right or wrong, that they lost money or they couldn't get their deposits back or they didn't like how they were treated. So I think that there's definitely a way to make some lemonade out of this, and hopefully throw some vodka in it, depending on how you want to view what we're going through right now. But I'm trying to take a really, really optimistic approach and say that this is great. It's going to trim back some of the competition. If you were in our shoes, where you're kind of a little bit more in a startup scenario, it's going to level the playing field with those folks that were established and out there for a while. And then the question is, what do you do from here? Right.
Well, Austin, the events oracle, I hope all of this all comes true, because I'll be coming right back to you afterwards, for the lotto numbers.
Yeah. Well, you can prove me wrong too.
No. I think what you're saying sounds perfectly rational. I think that's the, again, and I've heard that from a lot of different people as well. So hopefully that is all the case. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and stop talking about our Mr. COVID issue. But I wanted to see within what you do, if you have, and I know you probably have a million things related to this, is there any one gadget or app or piece of software or process that you find yourself using all the time that you could recommend to anybody who's listening?
Yeah, all right. So process side, Trello has turned into this app that it's pretty flexible.
Tell me what Trello is.
All right, so Trello is, I'm gonna pull it up while we're I forget how they advertise themselves. I should probably go look at that. It's a way for it. It's a program where you're able to track tasks, and you create these cards within. It's much like Asana, I guess. But the ability for us to share and how we're able to share and what we're able to share, and how you can attach, certain drives and things like that. It's just, we got into it because of its simplicity early on, and it was a great way to just sort of follow along with tasks and checklist items for us, and to see who was doing what, and something to make it all visible. And as we have sort of created our own templates for it and worked and reworked things, it's just so flexible. And I think that everybody should take a look at it, regardless of the size of the company or the size of the business. And even within your own personal workflow, that's just been one little process tool for us that's been great. I mean, other than that, gaff tape.
Okay, well, gaff tape, that's always that's ongoing.
Yeah,
that's ongoing.
I keep it in my bedroom. Whoa, nope, never mind.
I don't know if we want to go there. But I think everybody
maybe
does.
Maybe in your car. Keep it in your car.
I don't know. I know a lot of people who love gaff tape, and there's a difference between gaff tape and duct tape. So
no, there's not. They can both be great.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's funny. So Trello is something that allows you to share to-do lists on a simplistic kind of descriptor there. For the most simplistic approach to it, that's really how we started off using it. That's cool. Now, we track all of our projects that we're working on. It's a piece of our overall project management. Okay, cool. Well, we could always people could always use more project management help. That's for sure. That's what I find. All right, so now I'm going to go into another kind of. I'm going to try this out, and we'll see where it goes. I'm calling it East Coast, West Coast.
Yes.
All right, and I think at some point we had a conversation. I think I'm going to do some panel discussions on this show.
Okay.
And I think this would be a really good panel discussion. So, but I'm going to test it out here with you. All right. So you're on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast. And do you ever notice any regional differences on how things get done, like East Coast versus West Coast? Is there a different kind of mentality? I know
so much. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead. I mean,
all right. So like, let's say you flew into town, you went from New York to Seattle, which is where I'm at. And you came in to work with a crew out here. I think there's a certain a way to speak to my crews and my teams that give them ownership and show a certain level of respect that you sort of need to go into. So when you're on the 21st, 23rd, 24th hour of your day, you've still got those guys behind you, and everybody's moving well, and they like you. And I really feel that the personal relationship piece needs to be a little more gentle when you're working with folks on the West Coast. And in my experience, if I am, if I flew into work in New York, I've got to be a lot more direct, a lot more straightforward. And there's no, when I soften up something that I'm about to share, like let's say, for instance, the entire truss rig that's flown in the ceiling needs to move over 4 feet. And
oh my
it's
God.
already preloaded, and
I joke about that stuff. Hey, can we move that?
It's just not going to work, right? In over here in Seattle, I might collect everybody and say, okay, guys, listen, we had a little bit of an issue. You've been doing great today, and it's wonderful. But in the next 15 minutes, we need to take that whole thing down, scoot it on over, and put it back up. And I'll buy you all coffee to knock it out as quick as you can. If this happens over in New York, it's hey. What the fuck happened here? Get that down, scoot it over 4 feet, put it back up. Do it in 15 minutes. And that's, that's the difference in my communication depending on where I stand.
I think in both worlds, you get beaten up.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Nobody likes you in a spot like that. But I think that you can't, the thing that I love about folks from the East Coast is that I always know where I stand. It's always real straightforward. And that's honestly, it makes the working part great when, again, on that 21st, 22nd, 23rd hour of your day, you just got to get things done. You got to get in or get out or whatever, wherever you're trying to get finished. And the ability to just be real blunt and crass about it is wonderful. And here's the funny thing, man, you guys over there, there's still a fair amount of emotion, even though the way of communication is really direct. So I find that I gotta, if I'm barking at somebody, I've got to be careful that I don't cross that line. Your line's different. And
Well,
it's really hard to tell sometimes.
We're all artists. See, that's the problem. It's not a problem. It's that's just the way it is. Everybody's an artist, and you can be direct, but everybody still has a sensitivity. That's what I find, and that's what I find being on the East Coast is very. It's always a great challenge for me, because I'm the same way. I mean, it's like I want to be direct, and people say, "Why are you yelling at me?" I'm like, "I'm not yelling at you. I'm having a conversation. What are you talking about?"
Right. Now move it 4 feet over.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But it's I find here's the even if I work on the West Coast, I love working on the West Coast as well. I've done tech stuff out there as well. But the Midwest people, Midwesterners, are the nicest people. This is where I have my biggest challenge as an East Coast.
They hate you, don't they?
They do. I mean, I have to be really careful. It's everybody's yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. I'm like, okay, it's great, and I love that. But it's different. It's different. All right. So
I was actually raised down in Texas, and funny enough, like I remember when we moved up here. I finished high school up here. If you didn't have a ma'am or sir in your conversation with an adult or your teachers, there'd be kind of hell to pay for it.
Yeah.
When I did that up here, I would get in trouble because they thought I was making fun of their age. So I couldn't win either way.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I guess I could see that. All right. So here's the East Coast, West Coast question. Now, where do you get your coffee when you're on site? It's kind of like a let's run through the lightning round here. Where do you get your coffee?
Starbucks. Everybody goes to Starbucks.
Everybody goes to Starbucks.
You know what? You do not go to 7-Eleven. You don't go to Dunkin' Donuts. That I don't know how you people drink that stuff. You go to Starbucks.
We go to the coffee cart that's out on the street. All right. And you get your bacon, egg, and cheese and your coffee, and you bring it.
And that coffee's been sitting there for 18 hours. It's been
great.
sitting there for as long as you've been trying to win. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. So you're wearing shoes. What kind of shoes are they?
Today they're flip-flops because it's kind of nice and I'm stuck in my house.
So the question doesn't even have to be answered. Are you wearing socks with those or no?
No.
Okay, so no socks. All right, so there we go. West Coast. But to me, I'm wearing Merrells with wool socks in them all the time.
Perfect. Which is probably the same thing you wear to work, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
That's exactly right.
If I could get away with flip-flops at work, I'd do it.
I would do that too. I keep saying the first show I'm gonna call, I'm gonna be in my bunny slippers. So
perfect.
Yeah. So okay. How many minutes go by after you've asked someone to do something like move a piece of furniture, refocus a light, offload a file from your thumb drive before you ask if it's done?
Well, this is the worst part. And everybody that knows me will say that right after I ask it. So, hey, could you guys take that stuff, drop it over there, and then bring this cart back? Thanks. Are you
doing
yet?
that right now? Yeah, right. You're doing that right now, right?
Right.
When can I expect that thumb drive back?
back? Do you do this? All right. So I over-explain, and I am sure that so many people think that I don't think that they could, think for themselves. And I don't mean to. It's just for whatever reason, I think you get jaded after a while and you realize that some people just need to be walked through every single step. And instead of trying to figure out if the person you're talking to needs that or not, you just do it with everybody.
I do the same thing. I'm the queen of over communication. But I feel that sets people up for the best success. I mean, a lot of times people say, I can't read your mind. So that to me says that I haven't explained enough. And that's exactly the same way you're explaining. You want people to understand what your process is, I think. It's like, I want you to, this is what my expectation is. And now there's no gray area. So get to it.
I think there's so much going, and I'm sure you have this issue too, especially on an event. There's so much running through my head and how it all interacts with each other that I feel like if I don't do that, then I'm gonna slip up in explaining to that person that there's going to be something in my my thought pattern, my train of thought that's going to put them in a spot where they can't win. And my job is to make sure that everybody on the team is set up to win. So to me, that's the ultimate failure, when I ask something of someone and I don't give them the tool or the information to be able to do it right. Because then, I'm not happy with it. They're not happy with it. It's just a bad situation.
I totally agree. So that was fun, and I definitely want to do a panel. So you'll be invited back.
I'm in.
Austin. All right, cool. So we're getting to the end of our show here. How can people reach you if they want to get in touch with you, Austin?
EXPEvents.com. If you just want to hop on there, there's a couple different ways to reach out, and I'd be more than happy to chat with anyone.
All right. Sounds great. So you've got a website, you're on LinkedIn.
Yep.
I'll put your links in my show notes at the back end, and I'll put the website in and all that jazz. And it was a pleasure speaking with you, Austin. Thanks for being part of the show.
Hey, I got to tell you, I've listened to a couple of of your shows so far, and you guys are doing a great job. So thanks for letting me be a part of it.
Well, that's a wrap for this show. Hey, you can show us some love by subscribing to the show wherever you're listening to us. Subscribing is caring. You can also find us at eventyak.com. The opinions expressed on Event Yak are the opinions of our individual guests and not necessarily the organizations to which they're affiliated. Event Yak is a production of Moonfish Production Limited. Thank you for listening. Be kind, be safe, and stand by to stand by.